Sasol's AGM faced a missed opportunity as a climate activist compiled its cancellation, escalating investor pressure on the company's emission reduction plans. Just Share and other investors voiced a dissent, criticizing Sasol for its lack of interim targets and increasing emissions. The bold move by investors at the AGM signals a growing dissatisfaction with Sasol's progress. And joining us to unpack the details of this cancellation and Sasol's amplified investor concern is Business Day's Denene Erasmus. Denene, always a pleasure and a good afternoon to you.
Hi, hello. Yeah, good afternoon.
All right, Denene, let's talk about just what happened in that AGM on Friday that led to its cancellation.
So when the current CEO Fleetwood Grobler started his address, and he started by addressing some of the concerns that had been raised prior to the AGM by institutional investors. The address was disrupted by about 15 protesters affiliated with the environmental activism group Extinction Rebellion. So they were reading out statements and from people who have been affected by pollution caused by Sasol. And when the board tried to commence with the AGM and Grobler tried to restart his address, there were loud chanting from these protesters, which eventually just disrupted the meeting to the extent that it wasn't able to continue. So the meeting was cancelled and adjourned.
And of course, leading up to this meeting, there was quite a bit that had been said from some institutional investors about Sasol and its climate issues. Let's talk about some of those concerns that have been raised by these investors.
So the two investors that did indicate their voting intentions prior to the AGM were Old Mutual and 91, which are both very important investors in Sasol. And both of these institutional investors indicated that they would not support the non-binding resolution to adopt the Sasol's 2023 climate change report. It was for different reasons. And then Old Mutual also indicated that it would not support two other non-binding resolutions, also related to their concerns that the Sasol had not shown, in their view, sufficient progress on implementation of some of its climate change related targets.
So I think what's interesting, and I'm keen to get your thoughts on this, Denene, is, of course, the issue of climate change is one that companies like Sasol would have identified years ago, I think before the conversation really came into the main. But of course, we find ourselves now at a time when institutional investors in ESG are both compelling investors, corporates as well, to do what they should do. But for Sasol, it's a little bit different because their operations are deeply entrenched in fossil fuels. Is their case a little bit more complicated than it might be for other corporates and other listed entities?
It's extremely complicated. I think, it's well known that Sasol is, after Eskom, South Africa's biggest emitter of carbon emissions. It's one of the biggest emitters worldwide. And this is very much due to its use of coal as a feedstock and gasifiers to really power its production processes. And not only that, but it also has some liability in terms of Scope 3 emissions in the products that it produces. So it is extremely, extremely difficult for the company to progress with implementing climate change plans and a reduction of emissions without cutting back on actual production. And that, of course, will never be popular with all investors to have a sudden drop in production. So it is a difficult situation, but because Sasol is such a large polluter in South Africa, what Sasol does is ultimately very important for how South Africa as a country will be able to progress on its global commitments in terms of climate change.
Then I must ask you about green hydrogen, Denene. I'm wondering if you can, shed some light on this. We know that, Sasol has been vocal about the part that they're playing in green hydrogen. I think there's a project down in Sasolburg, of that tune. Is this a part of the process for them to really overhaul there? And also, I'm keen to find out, are they investing at the right pace? Because I guess pace is also important when we do have actual targets that are set in stone.
So I think green hydrogen definitely, sort of in the longer term and post 2030 is absolutely integral to Sasol's plans to ultimately reach their net zero goal by 2050. As we in the run up to 2030, where they've set their target to reduce emissions by about 30%. Most of that will come from as they try to replace some of the coal that they use in the production processes with gas. Which is another conversation, but yes, then absolutely beyond that 2030, and already we're seeing Sasol as one of the major corporate investors in South Africa's green hydrogen aspirations. The company has already started to produce some green hydrogen at a very limited volume, and they are involved with plans in the Northern Cape and in the Western Cape to develop green hydrogen production hubs. So it is extremely extremely important for the country's transition to becoming sort of a new era energy company, to see the green hydrogen really work out for them, pan out as the energy landscape in South Africa as a whole hopes it will.
Let's talk about gas, Denene. You mentioned that. Talk to us about where they do stand where gas is concerned.
So Sasol is already, it does use gas in its production processes, and it is of course the largest, basically the only supplier to into the South African industrial sector for pipe gas. That at the moment comes from its gas fields in Mozambique. Which is sort of at a point where it started tapering off. Sasol has invested in new prospecting and in trying to delay that tapering off of the gas from Mozambique, where they have won a couple of years in terms of supply. But ultimately, Sasol does need to find a long-term solution to gas supply that's not only going to replace their gas volumes now, but increase those volumes to quite a large degree as they try to switch to gas as a feedstock. And I think that's really one of the points that the institutional investor 91 pointed out in their reasons for not wanting to support the climate change report for 2023 is just that they are losing some confidence in Sasol's plans to find a solution for gas supply as we move towards the end of this decade.
It is a rather tricky one, Denene. I'm keen to find out from you. I mean, we don't know when the AGM will be rescheduled to, but of course we are seeing, environmental activists entering these meetings and causing disruptions, which is exactly what protest, I guess, is meant to do. But of course, there are very important resolutions that need to be passed at Sasol. Do we know when the date of the AGM will be? And if there's a way to even hedge against similar disruptions at the next one?
The date has not been announced yet, so the board only indicated that they will engage with shareholders on the way forward. And this is perhaps it's an important moment of learning for Sasol and maybe other corporates as well, that as climate change becomes a more pertinent and visible issue in our everyday lives, they are more likely to see this type of pushback from not only from investors, but also from civil society activists. So I think the Sasol board has reached out and said that it's willing to engage with activists. As far as I know so far, that engagement has not happened. But certainly for Sasol and other corporates in South Africa as well, it is important to learn how to best and effectively engage with activists and the concerns they have.
Well, anytime, Denene, thank you for your time this afternoon. It's always a pleasure hearing from you. That was energy writer for Business Day, Denene Erasmus.